March 15, 1962, 8:30, the cigarette smoke hung thick in the air at Ralph's restaurant in East Harlem. 11 men sat around 3 tables, their guns hidden under expensive suits. They were all there for one reason: kill Bumpy Johnson. $100,000. That was the price Vito Genovese had put on Bumpy's head. Enough money to buy a mansion in Queens. Enough to retire forever. And tonight, these 11 hired killers thought they had Bumpy cornered. Vincent the Knife Torino checked his watch. Any minute now, their target would walk through that door. Bumpy always ate dinner at Ralph's every Thursday at 8:45. Always sat alone. Always in the same corner booth. The plan was simple. Wait for him to sit down, surround his table. 11 guns against one man. Even Bumpy Johnson couldn't fight those odds. At 8:43, the door opened. Bumpy Johnson walked in, wearing a perfectly pressed navy suit and his trademark fedora. He looked around the room slowly, making eye contact with each hired killer. Then he smiled. He walked straight to his corner booth and sat down alone, calmly, like he didn't have a care in the world. Vincent signaled to his men. This was it. They stood up, hands moving toward their weapons. But before anyone could draw, Bumpy raised his voice and said 7 words that changed everything. "Gentlemen, your wives are having coffee together." What nobody knew, what the history books won't tell you, is that Bumpy Johnson had been planning this dinner for 2 weeks. And what he said next didn't just save his life. It made the most dangerous men in New York walk away without firing a single shot. If you think you know how this story ends, hit that like button. And if you're not subscribed yet, you're about to see why Bumpy Johnson was the smartest man in New York. To understand how Bumpy Johnson turned a death trap into his greatest victory, you need to understand what was happening in New York in March of 1962. By 1962, Bumpy Johnson was 55 years old and at the height of his power. He controlled the numbers game in Harlem, ran protection operations, and had connections that stretched from City Hall to the FBI. But he was also a marked man. The Italian crime families had been trying to push into Harlem for years, but Bumpy always pushed back. He didn't just run a criminal empire. He protected his neighborhood like a king protects his kingdom. When Italian mobsters tried to muscle in on black-owned businesses, Bumpy made sure they regretted it. When corrupt police officers harassed Harlem residents, Bumpy made phone calls that got those officers transferred. When families couldn't afford rent, Bumpy quietly paid their bills. This made him loved by his community, but it also made him a target. Vito Genovese was one of the most powerful crime bosses in America. He controlled docks, restaurants, construction companies, and politicians. But there was one thing he couldn't control: Harlem, and that drove him crazy. How does one black man hold up the entire New York underworld? Genovese had asked his underboss Tony Bender just a week before. "We move millions of dollars through this city, but we can't touch 20 blocks in Harlem because of Bumpy Johnson." The truth was, Bumpy understood something the Italian families didn't. Power wasn't just about fear. It was about respect, and respect had to be earned, not taken. Genovese had tried everything else. He'd sent negotiators. Bumpy sent them back with messages written in broken bones. He'd tried bribing Bumpy's lieutenants. They stayed loyal. He'd even tried going through legitimate channels, getting judges and police commissioners to pressure Bumpy. But Bumpy had connections too, and his were deeper. Finally, Genovese did what desperate men do. He put a price on Bumpy's head: $100,000 for whoever could kill the king of Harlem. The contract attracted the best killers in New York. Vincent the Knife Torino had killed 14 men and never been caught. Mickey, 3 Fingers Romano, could shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. Johnny, the Smile Maroney, looked like a banker but had strangled 6 people with piano wire. These weren't street thugs. These were professionals, cold-blooded killers who had never failed a contract. They chose Ralph's for the hit because it was perfect. The restaurant sat right on the border between Harlem and Little Italy. Bumpy ate there every Thursday night, always at the same time, always alone. It was one of the few places where he might be vulnerable. The restaurant's owner, Vincent Ralph, had been pressured by Genovese to allow the hit. "Close early," they told him. "Give us the dining room for a private party. What you don't see won't hurt you." But Ralph made a mistake. He assumed Bumpy didn't know about the plan. He assumed Bumpy would walk into the trap like a sheep walking into a slaughterhouse. What none of them understood was that Bumpy Johnson had the best intelligence network in New York. Not just informants and spies. He had something more valuable. He had friends. Maria Santos cleaned offices in the Genovese family social club. She heard them planning. Giuseppe Torino drove a cab and was Vincent's cousin. He heard Vincent bragging. Anna Maroney worked as a waitress at a restaurant where the hitmen met. She heard everything. These weren't people Bumpy paid. These were people he'd helped. Maria's son had been arrested on false charges, and Bumpy got him a good lawyer. Giuseppe's daughter needed an operation, and Bumpy made sure the hospital bill disappeared. Anna's family was being evicted, and Bumpy talked to the landlord. When powerful men help ordinary people, those ordinary people remember. And when those ordinary people work in the right places, they hear things. Bumpy had known about the hit for 2 weeks. He could have avoided Ralph's that night. He could have brought bodyguards. He could have set up a counter-ambush. But Bumpy Johnson didn't think like other men. While 11 hitmen were planning to kill him, he was planning something else entirely. Something that would end the threat against him forever without firing a single shot. Because Bumpy understood the most important rule of power. The best victory is the one where your enemies defeat themselves. March 15th started like any other day. Bumpy woke up in his apartment on Lenox Avenue, had coffee, read 3 newspapers, and made a phone call that would change everything. "Good morning, Mrs. Torino," he said when Vincent's wife answered. "This is Ellsworth Johnson. I was wondering if you and the other ladies would like to have coffee this evening. There's something important I'd like to discuss with all of you." By the time Bumpy hung up the phone, he had invited 11 women to coffee. The wives of 11 hitmen, all for 8:30 p.m., the exact same time their husbands were planning to kill him. 2 days before the planned assassination, the 11 hitmen met in the back room of a butcher shop in Little Italy. Vincent Torino spread a hand-drawn map of Ralph's restaurant on the table. "Here how this works," Vincent said, pointing with a bloody knife. "Johnson sits here in the corner booth. His back is to the wall, but he can see the whole room. That's why he likes it." Mickey Romano nodded. "Smart man, makes it hard to surprise him." "Not tonight," Vincent continued. "Tony and Frank will sit at the table by the door, block his exit. Mickey and Johnny take the table by the kitchen. He can't run that way either. The rest of us spread around the room. When I give the signal, we all stand up at once. 11 guns against 1 man." Johnny Maroney lit a cigarette. "What if he doesn't show?" "He always shows," Vincent said confidently. "Every Thursday, 8:45 p.m. like clockwork. Bumpy Johnson is a creature of habit. Tonight that habit kills him." What Vincent didn't know was that at that exact moment, his wife, Maria, was answering her phone. "Mrs. Torino, this is Ellsworth Johnson. I believe you know me by reputation." Maria Torino's blood went cold. Everyone in New York knew who Bumpy Johnson was, but why was he calling her? "Mr. Johnson," she said carefully, "how can I help you?" "I was hoping you could join me for coffee tonight. 8:30 at the Paradise Cafe on 125th Street. There are some things about your husband's business that I think you should know." The line went quiet for a long moment. "Mrs. Torino," Bumpy continued, his voice gentle but firm, "your husband is about to make a mistake that will destroy your family. I'd like to help you prevent that." Over the next 2 hours, Bumpy made 10 more calls. to Mrs. Romano, whose husband thought she didn't know about his construction job, to Mrs. Maroney, who suspected her husband wasn't really a traveling salesman, to Mrs. Benedetto, Mrs. Catalano, Mrs. DeMarco, and the rest. Each conversation was the same, polite, respectful, but with an underlying message. I know who your husband is, I know what he's planning, and I know things about him that you don't. Some of the wives hung up immediately. Others listened. But Bumpy only needed a few to say yes, because he understood something about these men that they didn't understand about themselves. Every tough guy has a weakness. Every killer has someone he cares about more than himself. And for these family men, that someone was sitting at home right now, wondering why a man like Bumpy Johnson was calling. Bumpy didn't tell the wives everything. He didn't need to, he just told them enough. Your husband is planning something tonight that will put your family in danger, he told each one. If you come to coffee, I'll explain what's happening and how we can protect you. It was brilliant psychology. He wasn't threatening their husbands directly. He was offering to protect their families. He wasn't asking them to betray anyone. He was asking them to have coffee. But the message was clear. I know where you live. I know your names. I know your children's names. And if your husband comes after me tonight, that information might become very important. By 6:00 p.m., the wives were on the phone with each other. By 7:00 p.m., they were comparing notes. By 8:00 p.m., they realized that Bumpy Johnson had contacted all of them. Mrs. Torino called her husband at the social club. "Vincent," she said, her voice shaking, "Bumpy Johnson called me today." Vincent nearly dropped the phone. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," I hung up. "But Vincent, he knows about tonight, doesn't he?" The phone went dead silent. Vincent's mind was racing. How could Bumpy know? They'd been careful. They'd planned everything in secret. "Don't worry about it," he finally said. "Just stay home tonight, lock the doors. I'll be home late." But Vincent was worried. If Bumpy knew about the wives, what else did he know? Within an hour, all 11 hitmen had received similar calls from their wives. The confidence they'd felt that morning was gone. The carefully laid plans suddenly felt like a trap. But they couldn't back out now. Genovese was expecting results. The contract was already signed. If they failed to show up, they'd be marked men themselves. So at 8:15 p.m., 11 very nervous hitmen walked into Ralph's restaurant. They took their positions around the dining room. They checked their weapons. They waited for Bumpy Johnson to walk into their trap. But each man was now wondering the same thing. If Bumpy knew enough to call their wives, what else was he planning? While 11 hitmen sweated bullets in Ralph's restaurant, Bumpy Johnson was putting the finishing touches on the most sophisticated psychological warfare operation in gangster history. His plan didn't involve guns or violence. It involved something much more powerful: information, timing, and an understanding of human nature that would make a psychiatrist jealous. At 7:30 p.m., Bumpy called the Paradise Cafe and confirmed that 11 tables were ready. Each table had a single chair arranged in a circle. On each table was a manila folder with a woman's name written on it. At 8:00 p.m., he called his driver. "Take me to Ralph," he said. "But first, we need to make a stop." The stop was at a private investigator's office on the Upper East Side. Bumpy had been paying Tommy Sullivan for 3 months to gather information. Not on the hitmen. Bumpy already knew everything about them. On their families. Tommy handed Bumpy 11 manila folders. "Everything you asked for, Mr. Johnson. Bank records, property deeds, school enrollment forms, medical records. All legally obtained, of course." Bumpy flipped through the files. Vincent Torino's wife didn't know her husband owed $50,000 to loan sharks. Mickey Romano's daughter was failing school because Daddy was never home. Johnny Maroney's son had been arrested twice, but the charges had mysteriously disappeared thanks to family connections. Good work, Tommy, Bumpy said, handing him an envelope full of cash. By tomorrow, this will all be over. At 8:15 p.m., as the hitmen settled into their positions at Ralph's, Bumpy made one more call. This one was to Vincent Ralph, the restaurant owner. Vincent, Bumpy said, I know you didn't want any part of this. I know Genovese forced you, but I need you to do something for me. Mr. Johnson, Listen carefully. In exactly 10 minutes, I'm going to walk into your restaurant. When I do, you're going to turn up the lights and turn down the music. You're going to make sure everyone in that room can hear every word I say. Can you do that? Vincent Ralph's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, sir. Good, and Vincent, after tonight, you'll never have to worry about Genovese again. At 8:43 p.m., Bumpy Johnson stepped out of his car in front of Ralph's. He straightened his tie, adjusted his fedora, and walked toward the entrance like a man going to dinner, not to his execution. His driver started to get out, but Bumpy waved him back. Stay here, he said, if I'm not out in 10 minutes. Go home, tell my wife I went down fighting. But Bumpy wasn't planning to go down at all. The moment Bumpy walked through the door, the tension in Ralph's was thick enough to cut with a knife. 11 professional killers tried to look casual while their hearts pounded like drums. Vincent Torino's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, then stopped. Something was wrong. Bumpy wasn't acting like a man walking into a trap. He was acting like a man who owned the place. Bumpy surveyed the room slowly, making eye contact with each hitman. He smiled at Vincent. He nodded politely to Mickey. He tipped his hat to Johnny. Then he walked to his corner booth and sat down, just like he did every Thursday night. Vincent looked at his men. This was it. They all knew the plan: stand up, draw weapons, end this. But something made him hesitate. Maybe it was the phone call from his wife. Maybe it was the calm confidence in Bumpy's eyes. Maybe it was the growing suspicion that they were the ones walking into a trap. Vincent stood up, his men followed, hands moved toward guns. That's when Bumpy spoke. Gentlemen, he said, his voice carrying clearly through the now quiet restaurant, your wives are having coffee together. 7 simple words that hit those 11 men like a physical blow. Vincent's hand froze on his gun. Mickey's face went white. Johnny's cigarette fell from his lips. Right now, Bumpy continued, still sitting calmly at his table, there at the Paradise Cafe on 125th Street. Mrs. Torino, Mrs. Romano, Mrs. Maroney, all of them. They're looking through some very interesting files I thought they should see. The silence in the restaurant was deafening. Files about their husbands, real business. Files about debts they didn't know existed. Files about arrests that were covered up. Files about where the family money really comes from. Vincent found his voice. You son of a... Sit down, Vincent, Bumpy said quietly, before you do something that makes your wife a widow and your children orphans. Bumpy stood up slowly, never taking his eyes off the 11 men who had come to kill him. Hear how this works, he said. You have 2 choices. You can try to kill me and spend the rest of your short lives looking over your shoulders, or you can walk out of here, go home to your families, and tell Vito Genovese that Bumpy Johnson is off limits. He reached into his jacket, and 11 hands went for 11 guns, but Bumpy pulled out a business card. This is my lawyer's number, he said, placing it on the table. If any of you gentlemen would like to discuss a career change, he can arrange legitimate work. Construction, trucking, waste management. All legal, all profitable, all safe. The room stayed frozen for what felt like an hour, but was probably only 10 seconds. Then Bumpy smiled and delivered the line that would become legend. Some of your wives are already there. Bumpy let that sink in for a moment, watching as the color drained from 11 faces. Vincent Torino was the first to crack. What the hell are you talking about? Bumpy reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a small radio. He turned the volume up, and suddenly the restaurant was filled with the sound of women's voices. "Maria, is that really true about the loan sharks? Vincent never told me we owe $50,000. My God, if the FBI has pictures of Johnny with those judges." The radio was broadcasting live from the Paradise Cafe. Every word the wives were saying could be heard clearly in Ralph's restaurant. "You see, gentlemen," Bumpy said, still standing calmly by his table, "while you were planning to kill me, I was planning to save your families. Those files they're looking at show exactly how much danger you've put them in." Mickey Romano's hands were shaking now. "How did you know about tonight?" "Mickey," Bumpy finished, "your cousin Giuseppe drives the cab that picks up Vincent every Tuesday. He's heard you planning this for weeks." He turned to Johnny Maroney. "Johnny, your wife Anna works at Terranova's restaurant. She served dinner to 3 of your associates last week while they discussed my murder." One by one, Bumpy revealed how he'd known about their plan. Not through fear or violence, but through the network of ordinary people whose lives he'd touched. "Mrs. Benedetto, your husband told you he was a construction foreman. The files show he's been collecting protection money from grocery stores in the Bronx. Your 10-year-old son asked his teacher what racketeering means yesterday." From the radio came the sound of sobbing. "Mrs. Catalano, your husband said he was investing in restaurants. The files show he's been running illegal gambling operations. The IRS is already building a case." More tears from the radio. Vincent Torino had heard enough. "Turn that thing off." "No," Bumpy said firmly. "Your wives deserve to know the truth. They deserve to know that 11 men decided to commit murder tonight, and they didn't care how it would affect their families." Bumpy walked slowly toward the center of the room, passing between the tables where killers sat frozen with indecision. "Here, what I know about each of you," he began. "Vincent, you have 3 children under the age of 10. If you kill me tonight, Genovese will have you killed within a week to cover his tracks. Your children will grow up without a father." He turned to Mickey. "Mickey, your daughter needs surgery next month. Cost $12,000. You think Genovese is going to help with that when you're dead?" One by one, he went through the room, making it personal, making it real. "Johnny, your son just got accepted to Columbia University. Full scholarship. You kill me, that boy will be the son of a murderer for the rest of his life." The radio crackled again. This time it was Mrs. Torino's voice, clear as a bell. "Vincent Anthony Torino Jr., if you're listening to this, and I know you are, you come home right now. You walk away from whatever you're doing and you come home to your family." Vincent's gun clattered to the floor. "Mrs. Romano to Mickey Romano, your daughter called asking why FBI agents were at her school today asking questions. You have 5 minutes to call her back and explain, or I'm taking the children to my mother's house in New Jersey." Mickey's hands went to his face. "Mrs. Maroney to Johnny Maroney, the neighbors know. Everyone knows. If you don't come home tonight and start making this right, you'll come home to an empty house." Johnny stood up and walked toward the door. "Wait," Vincent called out, but Johnny didn't stop. Then Frank Benedetto got up and followed Johnny toward the exit. Then Tony Catalano. One by one, the hitmen abandoned their mission. Not because they were afraid of Bumpy Johnson, but because they were more afraid of losing their families. When only Vincent, Mickey, and 3 others remained, Bumpy turned off the radio. "Vincent," he said quietly, "your wife is pregnant, isn't she?" Vincent's eyes went wide. He'd only found out that morning. They hadn't told anyone yet. "Congratulations," Bumpy said. "Boy or girl, that child deserves a father who's alive to raise them." Vincent looked at his remaining men, then at his gun on the floor, then back at Bumpy. "How?" he asked. "How did you know about tonight? How did you know about our wives? How did you know everything?" Bumpy smiled. "Vincent, I've been playing this game for 30 years. You want to know the secret?" He leaned in close. The secret is that it's not a game at all. It's about people, real people with real families. You tried to kill me tonight, but you forgot that I'm a people person, and people don't like to see their neighbors hurt. Vincent bent down and picked up his gun. For a moment, everyone in the restaurant held their breath. Then he handed it to Bumpy, grip first. "What do I tell Genovese?" Vincent asked. Bumpy handed the gun back. "You tell him Bumpy Johnson said hello, and you tell him that the next time he wants something from Harlem, he should try asking politely instead of sending guns." Vincent nodded and walked toward the door. "Vincent," Bumpy called after him, "tell your wife congratulations, and tell her the doctor bills are taken care of." Mickey and the others followed Vincent out, leaving Bumpy alone in the restaurant. He sat back down at his corner booth, picked up the menu, and ordered dinner. By 10:00 p.m. that night, every phone in Little Italy was ringing. The story spread like wildfire through New York's underworld. 11 hitmen had walked into Ralph's restaurant to kill Bumpy Johnson. All 11 had walked out without firing a shot. The details got more incredible with each telling. Some said Bumpy had hypnotized the assassins. Others claimed he'd made their guns disappear. The truth was even more impressive. Vito Genovese was eating dinner at his estate in New Jersey when Vincent Torino called with the news. "What do you mean you walked away?" Genovese shouted into the phone. 11 of you against one man, and you walked away." "Boss," Vincent said carefully, "this wasn't just one man. Johnson has the entire neighborhood working for him. Our wives, our families. He knows everything about us. You want to go to war with someone like that?" Genovese hung up the phone and stared at his own wife across the dinner table. For the first time in 20 years, he wondered who else might be listening to his conversations. Within 48 hours, Genovese called off the contract, not just on Bumpy Johnson, but on all operations in Harlem. "We stick to our territories," he told his lieutenants. "Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, Manhattan below 110th Street, but Harlem belongs to Bumpy Johnson." It was the first time in modern history that the Italian crime families had officially recognized another man's territory. 3 of the 11 hitmen took Bumpy up on his offer of legitimate work. Vincent Torino became a construction supervisor and never touched a gun again. His 4th child, a daughter, was born 6 months later. Mickey Romano moved his family to New Jersey and started a small trucking company with money he saved from not having to pay protection to various crime families. The others went back to their old lives, but they never forgot the lesson they'd learned at Ralph's restaurant. Vincent Ralph kept Bumpy's corner table reserved every Thursday night for the next 6 years, until Bumpy died of natural causes in 1968. The table remained empty during those dinners, but everyone in the restaurant knew it belonged to the man who turned a death sentence into a dinner reservation. The 11 wives continued meeting every month at the Paradise Cafe, not to discuss their husband's business, but to discuss their children's futures. Several of them became close friends. Mrs. Torino and Mrs. Romano's children grew up together. They called themselves the Thursday Club, and they never missed a meeting. That night at Ralph's restaurant, Bumpy Johnson proved something that changed the rules of power in New York forever. The deadliest weapon isn't a gun. It's understanding people. While his enemies were planning his death, Bumpy was studying their lives. He learned their weaknesses, their fears, their loves. He understood that behind every killer was a human being who wanted to protect his family. Most gangsters ruled through fear. Bumpy ruled through intelligence. Most crime bosses demanded loyalty. Bumpy earned it. Real power doesn't come from how many people are afraid of you. It comes from how many people trust you. It doesn't come from being the toughest guy in the room. It comes from being the smartest. Bumpy Johnson walked into a room full of killers and walked out alive. Not because he was faster with a gun, but because he was faster with his mind. If this story blew your mind, smash that like button and let me know in the comments. Could you have handled 11 hitmen the way Bumpy did? What would you have said to make them leave? Hit that subscribe button because next week we're telling the story of how Bumpy Johnson convinced the FBI to work for him instead of against him. Trust me, you've never heard anything like it. Drop a comment and let me know. What's the smartest way you've ever gotten out of a dangerous situation? I read every single comment. Remember, in a world full of tough guys, be the smart guy. And if you want to know more incredible true stories about the most brilliant criminal minds in history, make sure those notifications are on, because the next story is even more unbelievable than this one.